She said her husband died from a heart attack. This despite the obvious stab wounds on his body. Before calling, she cleaned up the crime scene and even took a nap. She even checked out a dating app.
That defendant plunged a knife into the shoulder of Michael Redlick.
Okay. Did you just find him? No, actually. It happened last night.
It is 7:22 in the morning. And Miss Redlick opens up her dating website. This is the dating website that defendant opens while her husband is laid out dead.
And get this, Danielle Redlick's husband used to be her stepfather.
Today I want to talk about Danielle Redlick and Michael Redlick. At first, Michael was Danielle's stepdad, then he became her husband, then she stabbed him to death, and the story only gets stranger. Some people think that what Danielle did was justified, and others, like her daughter for example, they think that she's guilty and manipulative. And there are things that make Michael look really bad, and there are things that make Danielle look really bad. So I want to do what I usually do on my channel, which is I want to give you guys the facts, then we'll discuss the theories, and then you can decide for yourself. So the whole thing started at 9:30 a.m. This was on January 12th, 2019, and in Winter Park, Florida, when Danielle called 911.
911, can you please call your medical? I don't know. I think my husband's deceased. There's been a tragedy at my home. He's stiff and he's wounded. He might have had a heart attack. I don't know.
Okay. Did you just find him?
No, actually. It happened last night. We had altercation and he stabbed himself, and I ran into the bathroom, and then when I came out, I tried to help him, and I saw he was lying in blood. He was actually choking me and trying to suffocate me first. I actually went for the knife, and he was screaming, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Stab me? And he grabbed it, and that's when he did it. He made a motion, and I ran out of the room. Because I'm on probation, I was scared to death.
So at first she was like, my husband had a heart attack. But then she was like, no, actually he stabbed himself. When the cops get there, the first thing they notice is the smell of bleach. And then they, right in the entrance of the home, they see Michael's body. And he's dead, and he's got a pool of blood around him, as well as a lot of bloody towels. They see a bucket, they see streaks of blood that looks like somebody tried to wipe it, and they realize that the crime scene has been tampered with. So they start questioning Danielle, and Danielle then gives them a third version of events of what happened. So according to Danielle, she went to McDonald's and she got a burger. She came back home, she was in the kitchen eating her burger when Michael came home. Now Michael ends up finding a text message on her phone, a flirty text message from another man. And he's not happy about it. So what does he do? He ends up taking a bite of her burger, like chewing it and then spitting it in her face. And so, hi guys, this video is sponsored by Native. Why not? I really tested out the effectiveness of the deodorizing part, because where I go to work out, they don't have showers, and I, live far away. So I usually have to run errands like after I go work out. They have this sensitive range, and it doesn't have baking soda in it. It has magnesium oxide in it. They have the fall collection, and it has things like warm cider and cinnamon. I've discovered the classic, and I've been really loving it, which is the coconut and vanilla. What's wrong with a little vanilla? Vanilla is good. Coconut and vanilla, you can't go wrong. Who doesn't want coconut and vanilla? Not only is the deodorant itself effective, but also it's plastic-free packaging now. It's non-sticky. It doesn't leave that, feeling. And it uses basic ingredients, simple things. Coconut oil, shea butter. So if you're interested, use my code Noor, and what it's going to get you is 3 plastic-free deodorants, which usually would be $39. You get them for $26, which is 33% off. And also I've been really liking the toothpaste that they have. It's like it's got charcoal in it. It tastes good. I like it. And with my code as well, you can also get 20% off any body wash or toothpaste. Thank you so much to Native for supporting my channel. And so then an argument starts because he spit a burger bite in her face. And so then someone grabs a knife. Danielle, she said she grabbed a knife, and then he ends up taking the knife from her hand and stabbing himself. So he still stabbed himself in this third version, but now it's because he did something to her. He accused her of cheating, and she took the knife first, but then he took it back. She says that once he stabbed himself, she freaked out. She ran to the bathroom and she hid in the bathroom. She said she stayed there for a while. When she came out, he was lying on the ground. She said that at first she thought he was being dramatic, so she didn't really do anything about it. But then after a while, when she was calling his name and he wasn't responding, she got concerned. So she goes down. She said she tried to give him mouth to mouth. He wasn't responding to it. She said she tried to call 911, but she couldn't find her phone. She looked for her phone. She couldn't find it. And so she decided to lay down beside him and just thought to herself, what should I do? So at first the cops didn't arrest her, especially because she had attempted to slit her wrists. So she had these wounds on her arm. They end up taking her to the hospital, and they Baker Act her, and she goes to the mental hospital. She ends up getting all these evaluations and stuff. So at first they're not really sure like what to make of the situation. But then in the meantime of the investigation going on, the medical examiner does the autopsy and the police are conducting the investigation. They're looking into her phone and stuff, and a totally different story emerges. The medical examiner concludes that, number one, Michael didn't have a heart attack, and number two, it was impossible for him to stab himself. He rules the manner of death as homicide, and he says that there's this one huge stab wound in his shoulder that went in so deep it like went down to his lung, and he also had a lot of defensive wounds. That's why he said it was a homicide, as well as like the positioning of it. He couldn't have done it to himself. They go through Danielle's phone. When they go through Danielle's phone, they discover that she has deleted a bunch of text messages because they can find records of the texts in the phone bill, but on her phone, like, they're not there. She has all these text messages with her and Michael leading up to the stabbing that have been deleted. And then they found evidence that she was actually on a dating app instead of calling 911, because they also determined that from the time Michael died to the time she called 911, 11 hours had elapsed. And in those 11 hours, it looked like she had cleaned up, she'd been on a dating app, she's stabbing and swiping. And then on top of that, she was deleting messages. So the dating app, if you're wondering, because I was, it's called Meet Mindful. Okay. And I was like, what? And it's a dating app for people that are into yoga and meditation and spirituality and stuff like that. So she's on this spiritual, mindful dating app while her husband is bleeding out from the mindful stabbing that she gave him. This is when her story starts to fall apart, because they're like, okay, you definitely could find your phone. You said you couldn't find your phone. That's why you didn't call 911. You not only could you find your phone, but you were hiding evidence on a dating app. Then you were cleaning for a long time. They found all this evidence of like footprints that seemed to be hers, because he had socks on and his footprints were bigger, and they were footprints that looked like they were from someone with a sock, and then they were like bare footprints from a smaller foot that matched her foot. And then there were all these marks of like diluted blood that looked like someone was like mopping, and furniture moved around. So she spent hours trying to clean up the scene and hide evidence, basically. There's a very important thing you need to know about Danielle and Michael, is that before they were husband and wife, they were father and daughter, kind of, not really, not blood, but he was her stepfather.
When did you first meet Michael?
I think it was like 1996. I was about 22. Well, I actually met him through my mother. He and I came together under kind of unique circumstances. Prior to us, he was actually dating my mother.
Did they go beyond dating?
Yes, they had a kind of spontaneous marriage.
So was Michael your stepfather at one point?
I guess technically.
What's the age difference between you and Mr. Redlick?
21 years.
So how do we go from stepdad to something else?
Well, they were only married, I think, 6 months. She discovered shortly after they were dating that she had an aggressive stage 4 breast cancer. They got married in Vegas, and within 3 to 6 months after that, she passed away. And Michael had asked me if I wanted to move in. That's kind of how things got started.
What was his employment at that time?
I think he was working for the Cavaliers, the Cleveland Cavaliers at that point.
Basketball franchise?
Yes, but then switched over to the Cleveland Browns.
A football franchise?
Yes. You know, there's time of loss for both of us, and we sort of bonded. And eventually it turned into a romantic relationship. I hadn't really disclosed to my family that we were actually seeing each other, you know, just because he had been with my mother, and it was just kind of a little bit weird. Sister that was living with us, I think she took it kind of hard, which I don't blame her. I think people were a little bit shocked.
So the dynamics of the relationship are really important here because he is older, wealthy, successful. He had a position of power over her. He was her stepfather, even though it wasn't for that long, but he was her stepfather, wealthy, powerful man. There's a big age difference between them. And then he's the breadwinner. She is younger and she's relying on him for income. And there's, you know, a power dynamic that you could say exists there, which some people find very significant when they're talking about whether or not this was justified. And they had 2 kids together. And the thing is, everyone who knew them said their relationship was toxic. Keep in mind, they both had alcohol in their system the night of the stabbing, and their 10-year-old son actually said that they were both alcoholics. And one of their friends said that the same day that the stabbing occurred, Danielle was actually at one of her kids' football games, and that she had been drinking and she was angry there, and she ended up getting into like some sort of argument with one of her kids at the game. And then she goes to McDonald's, and then she goes back home, and then Michael comes home and they get into this big fight. So it seems like there might be more to the story than what Danielle initially told investigators. The thing is, Danielle was actually on probation when she killed Michael. Why? I'm going to tell you. There's a backstory here. So this stabbing happened in 2019, January 2019. A year ago, in January 2018, she got arrested. Why? For resisting arrest and battery on an officer and public intoxication at a Wawa gas station. Let me tell you, let me read you the affidavit, okay? Whoa, my voice got really... Let me pull it up. Okay, so here's the arrest report. It says here her charges, she has battery on officer or firefighter, and then there's resist officer with violence, disorderly intoxication, disorderly conduct, alcohol, drugs, intoxication. Let me read you the report, okay? On January 26, 2018, DST Johnson was dispatched to the Wawa gas station at blah, blah, blah in Florida in regards to a battery that took place right outside the gas station between 2 females and 1 male. Upon arriving on scene, I made contact with Richard Arguello, Kelly Jo Pritz, and Danielle Justine Redlick. All parties involved indicated that a very aggressive physical altercation had occurred between Kelly and Danielle. While on scene, I observed that all 3 individuals were covered in blood and had sustained injuries. I then requested that the telecommunications center dispatch fire rescue and ambulance to the scene to render aid to Richard, Kelly, and Danielle. While they were en route, Richard and Kelly indicated to me that they and Danielle had just finished a night of drinking. And while on their way home, Danielle was the primary aggressor, whom started a verbal altercation, I said that weird, that became physical in nature. Richard indicated to me that it started in the backseat of his moving vehicle with Kelly and Danielle yelling at one another while he was driving. Richard continued to state that the altercation escalated to such a physical manner at one point which led him to pulling off the road into the Wawa parking in order to prevent a possible fatal crash from occurring. After talking to Richard and Kelly, I attempted to talk to Danielle, but she had nothing to say that was coherent in nature. It should be noted that Richard and Kelly do not wish to prosecute Danielle for the battery. When fire rescue and ambulance arrived on scene, Danielle was brought into the back of the ambulance to receive aid. While Danielle was receiving aid from the paramedics EMTs, she began to become disgruntled and rather short-tempered in nature with the paramedic EMTs who were rendering her aid. Danielle then started to yell obscenities and make vulgar statements at the paramedics EMT. They then proceeded to kindly ask Danielle to remain seated and calm down so they could render her aid. She then became more aggressive in nature and continued to yell obscenities and vulgar statements at the paramedic EMTs. After they told her again to calm down, Danielle proceeded to get in the face of one of the paramedic EMTs and push them. I then proceeded to tell Danielle a few times to stay seated and calm down, at which point in time she proceeded to yell obscenities and vulgar statements at me and push me as well. After Danielle pushed me and the paramedics EMTs, I attempted to restrain Danielle, and while doing so, Danielle proceeded to push, kick, and bite at myself and the paramedic EMTs. Danielle was then restrained so that she could no longer attempt to push, kick, and bite at another first responder. For our safety and her safety, we transported her to the ER to receive further aid from the hospital staff. After the staff cleared Danielle, she was handcuffed. Handcuffs were double locked, checked for proper tightness, and she was transported to the correctional facility, blah, 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 without incident. And it says, see in car cam footage. Okay, then it lists her charges, which I've already told you, but look at this part. Look at this part, okay? It says, statements made by defendant prior to, during, and after the arrest as related to each charge. She said, I am Winter Park, which is the neighborhood where they live in. And she also said Babe Ruth was a badass, etc. Most statements made by the defendant were random in nature or obscenities and vulgar remarks. Okay. So this incident takes place a year before the stabbing. This is why she's on probation, and she mentions this in the 911 call.
Because I'm on probation, I was scared to death.
And now a year later, she killed her husband. The thing is, another crazy thing happened a year before the stabbing, also in 2018, and that is Michael called 911 on Danielle.
911, do you need police, fire, medical?
Yes. We need a car here at 1231 Temple Drive. There's a woman that's a danger to herself and to others right now.
A gentleman that's a danger to our...
No.
You need to stop.
You better go in your room. Yeah. Please. Go in your room. Will you stop? Oh, all right. I will call you back. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
What is going on there?
So police do end up coming to the home, but Michael tells them that Danielle is passed out, like she was just drinking. She's passed out now, it's okay, and nothing really comes of it. And then a year later, he's gonna end up dead. But there were other incidents too leading up to this. Like when they started talking to the kids and the friends and the family, they found out that their relationship was violent, and Michael told them about instances where Danielle was violent towards him. So I'll read you a quote. It says, I said, how are things at home? This is a friend. And he would say, as long as I can lock the knives up, I'm okay. There's another quote I want to read you. It says, Michael had also allegedly told a friend that Danielle had been aggressive in the past. Quote, they started kissing and he said, she just snapped and started hitting me in the face really hard. After they got all this information, 3 weeks after the stabbing, they end up arresting Danielle. They charge her with second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. 3 years later, the trial begins. Okay, the defense decides to put Danielle on the stand.
Did you stab your husband?
I did.
Why?
He was suffocating me. I couldn't breathe, and he had me pinned down. You know, I was just in fear for my life. He had thought he snapped, and I could die.
Is this the first time that your husband had ever attacked you?
No, but it was one of the worst. He came up behind me and grabbed me from behind and started choking me. And he takes his hand, he's smashing my head, and so I'm just pinned up against the counter like this, and he's straddling my body here, and so my arm's here, and he's got his hand on my head, and he's holding it down. I started to pass out. I remember falling, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, is he going to kill me? I get scared and go into the toilet closet and lock that door.
So when this door breaks, You go, what do?
And I text my daughter inside the bathroom.
8:23 p.m. From user Danielle. I need to get out of here. He's being violent.
So Danielle testified that Michael wasn't abusive at first, but there was an incident that happened the first time he was abusive, okay? And it was at a concert. They were at a concert together and they run into her ex-boyfriend. And they end up having an argument about this after the concert. I'll read you the quote. It says, Michael told her that she would have rather attended with her former flame, and she quipped back, at least he isn't Jewish and cheap. Danielle said Michael responded by slapping her in the face, the first time he physically abused her. Similar incidents would occur off and on for years, she said, even after the couple's 2 children were born. But Danielle said that she never left because there was still a lot of good and she knew that Michael loved her. But the abuse worsened as Michael got older. Danielle said she testified that their sex life slowed down as Michael struggled with erectile dysfunction. After Viagra stopped working for him, she said he began taking shots of testosterone that made him stronger and more attractive, but also more abusive. So eventually things get even worse. They both cheat on each other. There are incidents where she moves out of the house and comes back, and then he moves out of the house and comes back. It's really bad. And it gets to the point where in 2018, the same year where she has that incident in Wawa and he calls the cops on her, that same year she files for divorce. The thing is, the divorce is never finalized because they end up deciding to reconcile.
Process server was attempting to serve him for the divorce, and you assisted him in not having that completed.
Yes, and that's was late April. He was just picking up some things, and he was sitting there, and I asked him what was on his mind, and he said, he just looked at me and he said, I love my wife, and he said he didn't want to be with another woman, and the way he said it just softened me, and so we were affectionate, and we laid down together that day. And ironically, the someone knocked at the door, and I looked at the window and I said, I think it's the divorce papers. And he just looked at me and he said, please don't. And so I sent her away.
So during the trial, Danielle didn't deny stabbing him or anything. It was a matter of why. Why did you stab him? And so she said, he was trying to kill her and she felt like her life was in danger, and so she did it to defend herself. But one of the major questions, the things that she had to explain, is why did you wait 11 hours to call 911? If you didn't mean for this to happen, you were just trying to save yourself in that moment. Once he was no longer a threat to you, why didn't you call 911? Well, according to her, she said that she did try to call 911, but she was so messed up that instead of dialing 911, she dialed 911, 911. And then the call, when it didn't go through, she just kind of decided she was gonna slit her wrist, and that's when she started Googling it, and then she found out how to do it. She said she did attempt to do it, and it does seem like she did attempt to do it, but that she didn't actually go through with it all the way because she was thinking about her kids, and that she, it's bad enough their dad is dead, now she goes, they're not going to have anyone, and that was her excuse. So speaking of her kids, right, this is a very interesting point, is that her daughter testified against her. Okay, so her daughter, it was a minor at the time, and so they wouldn't allow her testimony to be filmed, but I did find quotes from what she said, which I want to read to you. Okay, so this is her daughter. She says, my mother told me, I believe it was the day before he passed away, that she and my dad had been arguing and that he found a message on her phone from another man and that things might be off when he gets home from work. She said she could sense tension between her parents when her father came home because he was distant and not super talkative. She said she saw her father drinking and arguing with her mother. Quote, at one point they were arguing and I got between them and I grabbed the bottle of liquor he was drinking, oh my God, and threw it in the dumpster outside. That is so messed up. Afterwards, she said that she went to stay the night at her friend's house, and her father apologized to her the next day, saying he loved her and wished she hadn't witnessed the argument. This was the last time he ever spoke to her before he died on January 11th. She goes on to say that her parents' relationship was toxic, but she clarified when asked by the prosecutor, quote, "My mother is very toxic, very manipulative." So you have all of that. And then it's time for the verdict.
My understanding is that we have a verdict, so let's bring in the jury, please.
State of Florida versus Danielle Justine Redland. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. So say we all. Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of tampering with physical evidence.
And would you please poll the jury?
Yes, ma'am. Juror badge number 283, are these your true and correct verdicts? Juror badge number 18, are these your true and correct verdicts? Juror badge number 238, are these your true and correct verdicts? And juror badge number 5345, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Have a wonderful day. Take care. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We are adjourned. Everyone have a good day and be safe.
So she ends up bonding out by 10:30 that night. She bonds out, but then they put her back in and she has to await for her sentencing for the tampering with evidence charge. Danielle was free. She got out. Her dad was there to meet her. All these reporters were there. She seemed happy. She did talk about she wanted to see her kids.
What's the first thing you're gonna do?
Call my kids.
And then she has that sentencing where she gets basically time served and a year's probation. She also has to do like a mental health course, 30-day course, and pay a fine less than $1,000. But the crazy part, remember her daughter who testified against her? Well, she writes a letter that her guardian ad litem reads in court, and she just goes in on her mom. Let me read you the quotes from the letter. Okay, it says here, you may all be fooled by the incredible mask this woman presents to you all, but I am not. My father did not get away in time, and I am so worried for my brother. Judge, please make some kind of stipulation that Danielle, she didn't even call her mom, that Danielle not be allowed near myself and Sawyer, that's her brother, her younger brother. The only reason I am not personally reading this statement is because I simply do not ever want to be in a room with Danielle, ever again. I refuse to call her mother because she was never a decent mother figure to me. My dad was no angel and definitely had flaws, but he was so kind, gentle, and he never laid a hand on a single person in my family. She says that she and her younger brother still have nightmares and, quote, incredible amounts of trauma. I have developed a near fear of being murdered. She says, I lost everything at once. It was broadcasted to the world. We want to be left in peace. So they want the judge to order the mom to not be able to communicate with them or have contact with them. But the judge doesn't do that. The judge does not deny the mom from having contact with the kids. And also she doesn't require any type of alcohol, anything, which these are things the prosecutor asked for. So she does give her what I mentioned earlier, which is the probation and the mental health courses she needs to take. And that's it. Those are the facts. Now let's discuss the theories, because there really are three major theories here, which is basically like, was she really in danger? Okay, is she lying about her life being threatened? Was Michael actually putting her life in danger and this was self-defense, as she claimed and as the jury seemed to believe? Or a third option could be something in the middle. Like maybe her life wasn't 100% threatened, but he like pushed her, like, I don't know. So let's explore them. So the first one is that she's lying, okay? And the strongest evidence with that would be the daughter and what the daughter said about him never doing that. And also her previous altercations that she seemed to have, where she had a physical fight with her friend that they said she initiated when she was drinking. Then he calls 911 on her, Michael, saying she's a danger to herself and others. So maybe she was instigating. Then there are the statements that he gave the friends about how they were kissing and she started smacking him. And then there was the other statement saying as long as the knives are away. He should be okay as long as the knives are away. He said that to his friend, and then he ends up getting stabbed with a knife. I mean, what are the odds of that? So it seems like there is some evidence to support the claim that Danielle was the aggressor. And maybe that night she was the aggressor like she was on other nights. Her daughter is not even on her side. She was drinking. So she could have just lost it. You know, is it true that he took a bite of her burger and spit it in her face? That's possible. Does that warrant the stabbing? I don't know. I don't think so. Legally, it doesn't. It's assault, I think, to spit on someone, but I don't think you can stab them to death legally. So once I looked into it and did the research myself and read everything, I'm like, I don't know, because she was in her 20s when she got with him. She wasn't like, still, it wasn't like she was, you know, she was an adult and her mom just died of cancer. And you're gonna get with this guy. He was rich and powerful, and you're like, I don't get it. I don't know. People grieve differently. Maybe she was grieving. Maybe he manipulated her. But it just, you know, she said how her sister was mad at her. People in the family were shocked. You know, if my sister did something like that, I would be like, what are you doing? You're gonna be with like mom's husband? Like, what do you do? Like, you know what I mean? So that's weird. And then I don't know. So that's like the other thing. So let's say if she was somehow groomed and manipulated into it, and then maybe there are instances where he did something to her. He drank too. You know, the son said they were both alcoholics. He would tell his friends things, but maybe he's not telling his friend everything, right? Maybe he's just saying his side of the story. Maybe they both were physical with each other. The jury believed her. I wonder if the jury knew about these. I should have looked that up. I wonder if the jury knew about her prior stuff, because, you know, sometimes they don't allow that stuff in. Because that changed a lot for me too. I think it put things in perspective of like her history. And then there's the third theory, which is something in between. What if he did get a little physical with her? Maybe her life wasn't in danger, but it sent her into a rage because she already had these tendencies. She was already drinking. That, you know, he was cheating. He said she was. They were both cheating. Like, they were going through a divorce. They were on. They were off. Like, they were drunk. You know, it just like, what if it was just like a messy thing, and she got the better of him. You know, and it just was really messed up, because just because he's like, there is no perfect victim. Sometimes the victim is a piece of shit, but that doesn't mean they should be killed. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know. I really want to know what you guys think. Please tell me, what do you think in the comments? There's my dog. Bye.